At Say Hi to the Future, we believe exploring, instilling, inspiring, and nurturing human ingenuity is a leadership imperative. I'm your host, Saquib Vali, Explorers Say Hi to the Future, the fast growing community highlighting the human side of ingenuity. Our guest today is Michael Graydon, CEO at Food, Health, and Consumer Products of Canada. F8CP is the voice of Canada's leading food, health, and consumer products manufacturers. Michael is an accomplished CEO with experience in both public and private sectors. Prior to F8CP, Michael served as president of Park Holdings. Before that, Michael led BCLC. Previously, Michael had several senior roles in large organizations, including Mega Group, JD Sweet, Sobeys, the Keg Restaurants, and Carding O'Keefe Breweries. Michael's community commitments have included his role on the advisory board of the School of Business and Economics at Thompson Rivers University, the board of directors of the Interprovincial Lottery Corporation, and the board of directors of Brand Source USA. He has also served as vice chair of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce and was the co-chair of the 2014 Grey Cup in Vancouver. Welcome, Michael, and thank you for taking time out from your highly driven schedule. Michael, there's a lot of buzz around the industry with inflation, in some cases, shrinkflation. For someone that is in the thick of it all, help us distill the signal from the noise.
Yeah, it's really a tough time right now. I have massive empathy for the consumer and the inflationary impact on family cash flow. It's challenging. It really is. But there is no greedflation. Most of the inflation is coming from cost recovery at the manufacturing level, at the farm gate as well, in regards to agricultural output. And there's a lot of factors contributing to it. Climate change. We've had some really significant climate impacts, whether it be drought in the prairies to too much water in California, and it becomes supply and demand because there just isn't the same yield coming off the crops. So it's having an impact on cost. Geopolitical environments, the war in the Ukraine is the breadbasket of Eastern Europe. And when that inventory of agriculture is no longer available, then they go to other places to try to fulfill it. Again, it becomes supply and demand. And then you've got, regulatory burden. And I have to say here in Canada, the regulatory burden that we as manufacturers are having to deal with is quite extraordinary right now. And it's adding massive cost to the business. There's currently a movement for what we call front of pack labeling, where certain nutrients like sodium, sugar, trans fats, you will need to identify, where you are in the scale in regards to those within your product. That's a $10 billion cost to industry. So where does that go? Your margins aren't at a point where you can absorb that, so you need to pass it on. And we also have a very consolidated grocery market here. 5 retailers represent 80% of the grocery volume, and there's a power imbalance. And with that power imbalance comes a cost of doing business, which again is very difficult to be able to absorb those costs into your margins. So you tend to pass it on to the consumer. So it's kind of a perfect storm of issues: climate, consolidation, regulatory burden, geopolitical influence, and it all hit at once. Versus staged, where you could maybe manage it if one came at a time. They've all come at the same time. And so it is having significant impact. We're starting to see some reduction in inflation. It's still tracking, food inflation is still tracking ahead of general inflation, but it's coming down. But I think we've got another year or so of challenges as we start to move forward. The labor market, I think it's cyclical. As inflation continues to grow, the labor market feels they need to be paid more. And so you have contracts you negotiate, and or to retain your employees, you pay them more, which fuels inflation. So it's a cycle component of it. And so we've got another bit of time with that as well, which I think is going to be very challenging. So, and the industry is going through a lot of change as it relates to sustainability, and on 2 fronts. Across Canada, manufacturers are now responsible for recycling and all the costs attributed to it. So On July 1st, in the province of Ontario, as an example, 100% of the cost of recycling now is borne by the manufacturers. That across Canada is $1 billion increase in costs. And now we also have significant pressure on plastics coming from the federal government. And we're scrambling to try to find solutions to those regulations as it relates to plastics that allow us the ability and opportunity to efficiently get our products to market. And plastic has been a very good product for that. You know, if you're shipping products and it's in glass, it's much more expensive because they're heavier. So what are the solutions? Our perspective is that you need a circular economy. And there's nothing wrong with plastics. It's just that you don't want them in landfill. You want them back in that circular economy so that you get recycled content back in and away you go. But this government is hell-bent on getting plastics out of the environment. And there just aren't solutions at this particular juncture to be able to compensate for that. So again, a lot of costs associated with it. So it's going to be a rocky road for a couple of years.
I understand every time that something like this happens, you're mentioning it's a cost to the industry, but let's face it, in the end, it's a cost to the consumer, right? I mean, because all of this, someone has to pay for it, and in the end, it's the consumer that ends up paying for it. So I understand, and in some cases, some of these are for a reason why we need to do them, but I completely understand some are unforced errors, and some of them are just circumstantial. But extremely helpful perspective. So thank you, Michael. Michael, as the CEO that works with other CEOs and senior leaders across the industry, you wield a ton of influence and you get to hear from a lot of influential leaders. Our listeners would greatly benefit from your leadership insights. Let's start with your leadership take on Ingenuity, and importantly, the human side of Ingenuity as it relates to you, your organization's success. What's your take? When has it worked well? When has it not? What have you learned? So give us your take, Michael.
Yeah, I think if you go back and even look at the amalgamation with CHP to create FHCP, I think that was ingenuity in regards to creating an organization that could add a lot more value to the industry. And I think it was very, very helpful from that perspective. I think as a leader, you need to be in a position to be able to seize and look and identify those opportunities and always be looking for them. And, you know, I think if you're comfortable with the status quo, then I think as a leader, you will fail. And it may do you okay for a short period of time, but you always have to be inquisitive. You always have to look for those opportunities to grow and add more value. You know, I'm very privileged when you look around the board table of my organization. To be on our board, you must be the senior most person in your business in Canada. So I am sitting around the board table with some phenomenal leaders who are running very, very large businesses. I am sitting around the table with people that are entrepreneurs running small to medium enterprises that have been just tremendous successes. And so my opportunity, and I think, again, as much from them as I can. And I learned a long time ago that I am never going to be the smartest guy in the room. It's just not who I am. But I can tap into the intelligence that is around me, surround myself with amazing people, and leverage it as much as you can in regards to moving forward. And I think it's done me well in my career. You know, if I look beyond FHCP and my time running the British Columbia Lottery Corporation, when I took over that organization, it was generating about $750 million a year in profit to the province of British Columbia. 7 years later, it was a $1.5 billion profit center for the government. We launched the first successful regulated online gaming website in North America. But we also, on the other side, had a world-renowned responsible gaming program that the industry was the envy of the industry worldwide. And again, I think in a public environment, as a crown corporation of government, showing that level of ingenuity and innovation drove massive returns for the people of British Columbia because we became the largest contributor to Treasury in the province. And if the British Columbia Lottery Corporation was to have disappeared, there would have been a 3% increase in income tax to compensate the revenue we generated for government, which went just to general funds, but it did a lot of great things for the province. So again, that organization had been sleepy for many years because the leadership were happy with the status quo, run the lottery business, have some casinos. And we looked at it very, very differently. And I challenged the organization to be bigger, to be better. And it's funny, when you've got that sort of leadership at the top, as long as you are comfortable with empowering your people, it is magical what can happen in an organization, because all of their ingenuity starts to bubble to the top and emerge. And the amount of ideas and opportunities that percolate within an organization. And if you are in a position to influence people to think that way, they will respond that way. And you will find that the companies become amazingly successful. And I think BC Lottery Corporation was like that. I was instrumental in the transformation of Keg Restaurants to what it is today from where it was. Mega Group went from, a buying group for independent furniture, appliance, and consumer electronics to one of the largest buyers in the whole retail environment. And again, it was the same thing. And it's not that I had the ideas. Don't get me, I didn't. I just created the pathway for good people with the ideas to be able to just bring phenomenal success to these organizations. And we're experiencing exactly the same thing here at FHCP.
And this is exactly why, Michael, it's always so much fun speaking to you, because I learn something every single time, and you're extremely thoughtful in how you express yourself. I mean, I think it all starts with, like you said, not being satisfied with the status quo. But then once you're not satisfied, the other side to it is just go in with curiosity and not with, I know what to do next. And that curiosity and inquisitiveness, I think, has been a hallmark for every time you've been in an organization. So kudos to you for that. I think, when you said you're not the smartest person in the room, well, guess what? I think the wisdom is anyone who believes or has the desire to be the smartest person in the room is not, right? That's just how it is. And some of the insights you gave were fantastic. Let's move on to talent, Michael. So what are some specific traits you at FHCP or in the broader industry look for in talent, especially ones you're looking for and groom for future leadership?
Yeah, I think, I want to make sure as we develop, and we are, I'm on the back nine of my career, and we are developing succession plans within this organization. I've always prided myself in regards to having strong succession within my organizations. When I was the CEO of Mega Group and left, my 2IC in that environment was the chosen replacement. When I left British Columbia Lottery Corporation, same thing happened. And I took a ton of pride in that because I was able to develop those people effectively so that they were considered by the boards of those organizations to replace me. And I always find succession, especially if a business is running fairly well, then succession internally can be a very helpful process in regards to ensuring continuity. And maybe, if you've prepared that talent properly, they'll be starting from a foundation and a plateau that can take it to the next level. And that's kind of, I think, what my role in succession planning is. I don't want them, if they're successful in replacing me, replicating me. I want them to take it to the next level. And that becomes very key. And to a certain extent, you've got to have some personal humility to be able to be in a comfort zone that somebody's going to take it beyond where you did. But that's exactly what you want to happen. And again, it's that mindset of not being stuck in the status quo. If an organization like ours doesn't continue to evolve and to respond to the needs of the membership and have the right leadership in place to be able to accomplish that, we will fail and we won't create the value that's necessary. So I always try to look, from that perspective for talent that has the ability to have some of the traits that I do. And I think some of that is being really good listener, being a really good communicator, have some good strategic sense in regards to being able to think through issues and problems. But the other is to have that quality of confidence to empower people that work with you, because I think that still is absolutely the best way to maximize an organization. So in our organization, and we've just gone through some recruitment of some new talent here, part of it is you got to look for those really, really strong technical skills, depending on the role. But that doesn't mean that you avoid the emotional skills that are necessary as well. And I really like to try to attract people into this organization that kind of have both, have that emotional skill set as well as a technical skill set. And then the last is really about, you're creating a little bit of an environment that requires culture. And if you're not cognizant of culture within your organization and recruiting talent to the organization to fit within the culture, then it tends to create problems within the organization because it's internal tensions that become negative versus positive. So every employee that gets hired in this organization, I empower the hiring manager to hire the right skill. I like to meet the person before they get a job offer, just to get my level of comfort that they're culturally going to fit in the organization and not be a problem down the road. And because that can be, one person can have such a negative impact on 39 other people if you're not careful. So that cultural connectivity is absolutely important too. So I look to that in recruiting talent. So it's just not the skill component of it, it's that emotional talent as well, critically important.
For sure. And I think you've already gone on to sort of bled into the next part of this, which is, what are some challenges in finding the right talent, and what would you attribute those challenges to, and how are you coping with that at FHCP, for example?
Yeah, it's really interesting. This year, we have just recruited two senior roles within our Ottawa office in the regulatory health side of our business. We looked a year ago for the same kind of roles, and we couldn't find anybody. It was just impossible. This year, we went back to the marketplace, and there was just a massive pool of opportunity of people. So I think some of it's timing and availability, but it's still finding the right people that are out there, finding the right mix. And there's, this new evolution of people's desires of where they want to work and how they want to work. And 3 or 4 years ago, pre-COVID, we came to the office 5 days a week, and everything was fine. You created community within the building. Now it's not quite the same. So you're having to deal with that in regards to people's expectations. Fortunately, the turnover in our organization is very minimal. All the additions we've made are actually not necessarily replacements, they're additive, because the capacity of our work continues to grow. But I also think very strongly that the culture of the organization is important. And I haven't quite figured out how to create the right culture in a 100% remote environment. So we're still a hybrid environment. We like our people to come into the office 2 days a week, every Tuesday and Wednesday. It's not always easy to do that. Some people will just say, you know what? I had a job offer over here and I can stay in my pajamas all day in front of my laptop at home. And so I'm going to take that job. So you're missing out on some talent at this particular juncture, but I'm slowly but surely, I think that's starting to change. I think, I had some confidence that the reality of us all being social creatures is starting to emerge back into our decisions and how we work. And we may not want to do 5 days a week, but we do want to be around people. And we do want to engage and be in an office. And if that's only 2 or 3 days a week, that's okay. But it's right now, that's the challenge, is getting aligned with how you function as a business, what's in the best interest of the overall business, and does that align with the talent that you're trying to recruit? And fortunately, right now, it seems to be okay. It's interesting. We have 2 offices. We have an office in Ottawa and an office in Toronto. The office in Ottawa, part of it, I think, because there's a lot of government relations and regulatory work that is done here. And our office is central downtown Ottawa, close to Parliament Hill, and where our stakeholders are in regards to government. So it's a lot easier to come to the office than it is to work from home because there's a lot of face-to-face meetings. So in this office, pretty much 5 days a week again. In our Toronto office, where the bulk of our organization sits, we're 2 days a week. Now, we're almost 100% every Tuesday and Wednesday, but there is nobody there Monday, Thursday, Friday. So it's just, it's just a little bit different expectation in regards to that market and the type of work that gets done. So managing that is interesting, but we're getting through it.
Yeah, and I think in some cases everyone's adjusting to this new reality, not just the employers and the organizations, but also the employees, right? The people who are looking for jobs. I think coming out of the COVID there was a certain thinking, like you said, we're all realizing that staying at home in pajamas in front of a laptop, while that might sound convenient, may not necessarily be the best thing for your personal development either. And we're all social human beings. So I see that there's an adjustment that's happening.
Yeah, it's been
Michael.
interesting too, because I've had to change. Because
Mhm.
I grew up in an environment where you got to the office before your boss and you didn't leave until he left. And it was all not that you clocked in, but there was just a different mindset. And now as a leader, when you've got changing dynamics, you have to evolve. You can't keep using the old school. That you've got to respond to the changing needs of the people that work for you, and the generations are evolving. And it was interesting. We had a particular person we were looking to recruit, and we really liked them, presented an offer, and they went back and took that offer and leveraged it to get more money from where they were, and the people were all upset here. And I said, look, that's the generation. It's the me generation. They're in it for themselves. You just got to think differently and don't get fussed by it. It's not the way it used to be. And, you look at resumes and people are moving around. When I was growing and expanding my career at a young age, you wanted to make sure you didn't have too much on your resume, that it showed that you had stability for a period of years at a time. Doesn't happen anymore. People move around, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. But you got to change your perspective, or else you're going to lose the opportunity to identify really good talent. You may not have them for 5 or 8 years, but you may get 4 really amazing years from them and leverage it and take it and run with it. But that's just the changing dynamic. So, I found that I really have to change how I look at things a little bit. To be able to respond to sort of the changing dynamics of having, younger generations in your business. When I was running BCLC, we had 1,200 employees. I have 4 different generations of people in that building, and all very different. And we had biometrics to be able to enter, because it's a government facility, so you had to put your thumbprint down to be able to open the door. I had some young generations, they found that to be intrusive and they did not want to do it. So we had to create another mechanism for them to get into the building. Then you got to respond and change. If you want these people to come to work, then you got to sort of give a little bit.
Sure. And like you said, I think this evolution right now is about return to work and some of these things, but this adjustment between employers' expectations and employees has been on forever, right? I mean, it's been evolving all throughout, and I think we'll continue to do so as we keep going forward. Let me ask you, Michael, you are with amazing leaders, and we have quite a few leaders who'll be listening onto this podcast, specifically around talent. Is that an area that FHCP, like you've got regulatory and advocacy, or retail side, is there an area that you guys also advise, or have created some room for how to make the industry cope with some of the challenges related to talent?
Not as much with talent. Our focus is more around the reputation of the industry. And I think that does have a connectivity to talent. If the perception of the industry is very negative, it's really hard to attract people to it. So we invest our time in trying to put a good public image, create public trust in regards to what we do as an industry, as manufacturers. And I think that's kind of the role that we play. And we leave it to the companies themselves to develop their cultures and develop their mechanisms. If we've got a large manufacturer and organization, it's going to be hard for them individually to sort of create this premise of public trust around the industry. But when we're speaking for the industry in its entirety, I think it is very, very helpful. And if it looks like it's an appealing industry to work in, then I think you'll find that ability to attract talent will be very positive, because people like to work in industries that are positive, progressive, and consumer packaged goods is that. There are some challenges that exist, but there's challenges in every business. So I think that's kind of our role, is to make sure that more and sort of environmental umbrella around the industry and its importance to the economy becomes really our contribution to driving that talent mix within our organizations that are members.
Thanks a lot, Michael. Our time is about coming to an end. Thank you very much for taking the time and sharing your insights. Our listeners would love to hear more from you. We will tag you and FHCP in our show notes. But before I let you go, is there, right now we came into this and I've been asking some questions, and you've been a great contributor in your insights. Is there anything that you came into this conversation that's on your mind that you wanted to share with our listeners for their benefit?
I think the only thing I'd say is, and it's really sort of an extension of the conversation we just had, CPG is a phenomenal industry. It's fast-paced, it's innovative, and whether it's a large manufacturer and what they bring to those entrepreneurial founder organizations that are doing some amazing things, it is a fun industry to be in. It's fast-paced, ever-changing, and if you're in a situation where you're looking for a career change, I would really, really suggest keep your eye on this industry and have a look at it, because there are some very dynamic companies. It's just an absolute blast, and it's full of frustrations, no question, as many businesses are. But the upside opportunities and just the level of engagement, it is pretty extraordinary. So, to the listeners out there that are maybe thinking about what's my next career move, take a really good look at this industry. It's pretty fascinating, and I think they would really enjoy it, because it's incredibly rewarding. As you know from your previous life, it's pretty amazing.
It is very amazing, and thank you for being the ambassador for the industry, every single time. So thanks a lot, Michael.
My pleasure.
The Say Hi to the Future podcast series is produced by Sonia Romero, edited by Matt Miller, and special effects by Edward Vasquez. Please leave us your thoughts and let us know if there is a leader you want us to have a conversation with next.